Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Montgomery County Community College's Masterclass series. Yay! We try to do a different subject almost every time, and today's subject is about music law and entertainment law, and for that, we're going to introduce you to Mr. Bernie Resnick, a very acclaimed entertainment lawyer here in Philadelphia and across the country, and thank you for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
My pleasure. And I'm going to turn it over to you, bud.
All right, thanks. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm glad that you're all here and in school. Stay in school, graduate. It's the most important thing is not whether your class rank is 1, 2, or 22. It's whether you got the diploma, because then you go out and try to get some work. And once you get the diploma, they can never take it away from you, okay? It's very important. And also, let me say, the people that you meet now will become your network of friends and colleagues as you grow older. I'm still in touch with a lot of my college mates, do business with them, and call on them for assistance and advice now and then. So stay friends with everybody that you know here. Don't let everybody just scatter when you graduate and never see them again until reunion 5, 10 years down the road. You know, it's good to start your network right here because you guys can say, hey, we knew each other when, and stay in touch. It's very important. So what I'm here to talk about today is business arrangements for musicians. You know, it's the music business, but it's not just about the music. It is about the business. I call it a pennies business because if you take care of the pennies, then the dollars will land in your bank account. So you got to make sure to take care of those pennies. And that requires a lot of paying attention to things, a lot of planning in advance. And I'll talk to you about a few of the things that are important about how musicians make money and about who they have around them as their circle of assistants and advisors, their team, in other words. So I'll cover all that stuff. I only have an hour. I've got some pictures to show you, so let me just get right into it, okay? First of all, let's talk about the main categories of income that somebody can have in our business. As you can see on the screen, there's 5 listed. There, of course, are more, but these are the main 5 that most musicians, songwriters, producers will make money from in the business. We have live concert performances. We've got sales and streams. It used to be CDs, and before that was cassette, before that 8-track and vinyl, back when your professor and I were kids. But today it's mostly streams. We also have merchandising, where we use person's name, what they look like, their likeness to make money. I mean, for example, I see today someone's wearing a shirt that says the Beatles on it. Okay, that means that the Apple Corps, the Beatles company, made a couple of dollars or pounds when you bought that shirt. And that's an example of a merchandise and an endorsement. Also, if you see someone on television, a celebrity, Britney Spears singing for Pepsi or Diet Pepsi, whatever she sings for, that's another example of an endorsement deal. We'll also talk about music publishing. That is a special category with lots of subcategories, and I'll go into those in detail. All have one thing in common, that's that you wrote or co-wrote the underlying musical composition. Not the recording, but the song itself. So if you're the songwriter, all the different ways you make money are called music publishing. I'll get into more details about that in a few minutes. And finally, we have some additional categories, such as neighboring rights, which is how you make money overseas in other ways that aren't available for you in the United States. It's an international business now, so there are ways to make money outside of the country that we're not entitled to here, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So, a little bit of detail. Let's start with live concert performances. When most people go out to play a show, they don't book it themselves. They use someone to find the work for them. That's called a booking agent. An agent needs to be licensed in most states, and their job is very limited. They're finding employment for people. If you're in a band and you're playing a local nightclub or bar at Tuesday night at 2 o'clock in the morning, and maybe you get $50 to split between the 5 cats in the group, okay, fine. But once you get a recording contract and you're on the road doing a national tour, it's hard to make these arrangements yourself. So you hire an agent to do that for you. Normally, the agency charges a commission. You don't pay them by the hour or by the week or by the day or on a salary. They get a percentage of everything that the musicians earn to play the show. That percentage is normally around 10 or maybe 15%. So it's a small slice of just the show income. The agent doesn't get any part of the other categories of income that I mentioned. The agent's revenue is limited to just what he or she earns on the show, and they get a percentage, usually 10 or 12 or 15%. We also have different ways that we can charge to perform the concert. So you can charge a flat fee, it's $10,000 for our band to show up and play for an hour, or maybe it's a percentage of what people pay for admission. That's called a door deal. So anybody who comes through the door pays some money, and the band shares it with the venue or the promoter of the show. Those are negotiable. How much you get is all over the map. It could be that you get a certain amount guaranteed to you and a percentage of the door, or a certain amount guaranteed against a percentage of the door, or some other combination or way that you can do this. But the two basic ways to get paid are a flat fee or a door deal. Most bands, when they get to major recording contract, they start by going out and playing festivals where they're on a all-day long show with multiple stages and multiple groups playing. Those typically are flat fee kind of deals, where they get a certain amount to play each show on the festival circuit. Then we have incidental costs. These are the things that the artist has to pay for to go from town to town. And there's a list here, but you can see travel, like airplane or trucking or a van or a minibus to take the band around. We have to pay for hotel, everybody in the band and the support staff, like the roadies. They have to lift all that equipment. They're usually big dudes and they're hungry, so it costs some money to feed them. You also might have to bring an opening act with you. I represented the manager of Lady Gaga, and when she first started, she was 20 years old, singing in the small clubs in Lower Manhattan in Alphabet City in New York in the East Village. And there was a group that she played with a lot. They were known in that area, a glam rock band. They were called Shiny Toy Guns, I think was the name of the band. And so she played opening for them for quite a while. And then when she got to be famous and got her recording contract and went out on the road, she was very sweet, and she said to that group, hey, come out and play with me now that I've got a record deal, and she brought them on the road with her. And so she paid for those guys to come out and perform, and sometimes when you're the headline, you can do that if you want to bring your own support act with you. Sometimes the promoter will say, well, you haven't sold enough tickets for the show, so the promoter, will hire a local act to be a support act because people know them around here. They don't know your band as well. You're from Pennsylvania, we're here in Ohio, so we're going to get a local act from Cleveland to open for you, and that'll sell a bunch of tickets and help to sell the room out. So that might happen as well. Also, if you're going overseas, you may need to pay for a visa. I'm not talking about the credit card. I'm talking about permission to enter another country to work. In order to do that, you have to ask in advance that other government whether you can be eligible to come in, because you're potentially taking work away from one of the local residents. So you need to get approved by the local government to do that. Similarly, foreign groups who come to perform here, like any of the groups that come from England or from Japan or Korea, BTS, they need to go to the United States Customs Immigration Service, ICE, to make permission in advance to come here to perform and to work. And it's quite complicated, quite expensive, and it takes quite a long time. That's why these tours are announced 6 to 9 months in advance, because you need that much lead time to get people permission to come into the country, which is a very, very exhaustive examination that's done of the performers, because we want to make sure the country's safe and we don't accidentally let some terrorists in here to cause some troubles. We also have taxes. You always have to remember your uncle, Sam. You always have to take care of Sam, right? So when you make money playing shows, it's not just put it in your pocket and go. Even if they pay you in cash, you have to set some aside to take care of Sam. Oh, here's a Beatle, Paul McCartney. I'm trying to grow that haircut, okay? The wife wanted long hair, and I said, sure, Sally, I'll do it. And so this is what I take to the barber shop and say, I'm trying to get this. Wings Over America, 1975. And look at the bass. He's playing a Rickenbacker. Beautiful instrument. That's not the famous Beatle Hofner bass that he's usually seen playing. In the 70s, this is the instrument he played, and it's a really nice instrument. So, all right, let's continue. That was just a picture. So now the second category I mentioned after live concert performance is recorded music sales, and that includes streams. So a traditional record company artist deal is very long, and I negotiate these things, so I know, I draft them. They're usually between 25 and 125 pages, depending on the record company you're dealing with. They can be very complex and very lengthy. and hotly negotiated, because you're getting into a multi-$100,000 or sometimes multi-million-dollar deal with a record company that's investing tons and tons of money into building the career of the artist. So because of that, they have a lot of rights they need to arrange and protect, and the lot needs to be worked out with all the details of what it takes to record, manufacture, distribute, and promote sales of brand new recordings. Hence, the contract gets very lengthy. The traditional relationship is that the record company owns the master recordings. Why? Simple. It's the golden rule. The one who has the gold makes the rules, right? And they pay for everything. So because they pay for everything, they want to own the master recording and the copyright for the master recording. And then the record company has the ability to exploit that copyright and try to turn it into money for many, many years. There are some new types of relationships, so let me just explain those for a second. There's something called a 360 deal. That's the new style, which is really the old style. It's how record contracts used to look in the 1950s and 60s, and now we're back to that again. Here's the concept. When a record company signs an artist, they don't know whether the artist is going to make money primarily by selling recordings, or by playing concerts, or by writing music, or perhaps producing other people's music, or maybe becoming corporate spokesperson, fashion model. They have no idea. What they do know is they're investing tons and tons of money to help the artist build a brand. And the brand is the artist. I don't care who the artist is. Whoever your favorite artist is, think about what's unique and special about that artist and why you like them. And if you were going to describe them to someone else, you'd be able to tell someone else exactly what's special about this artist. Let's take Prince. Okay? Small guy, tremendous musician, plays multiple instruments, tends to dress in purple. Sounds like a mix of Bob Dylan, James Brown, Jimi Hendrix, and Joni Mitchell thrown into a blender, and you get Prince, right? So it's easy to describe that artist and any other artist that you might like to your friends. And so the label's helping you build that brand. And they don't know what category is going to be the one that the brand makes the most money in. So the concept is, think about life as a compass. When you're riding an airplane or a boat, you could go to the left or the right, the north or the south, and they divide the directions you go into 360 degrees, any way you want to turn in a big circle. And so the concept is that no matter how you make money in whatever direction you go, you're sharing that with the record company in any direction, no matter what the category. And that's because they're helping you build the brand. They're planting the seeds. Therefore, they'd like to be around for a little share of the harvest. So most record deals now are what we call 360 deals, where all the various rights I mentioned are in some way, shape, or form connected to or controlled by the record company. We also have license deals and distribution and self-distribution. They're all similar. In those situations, there's no record company to pay for everything. So if the artist wants to come to the studio here at Montgomery County Community College, the SRT, they'd have to get some money to pay for the room, and to pay for the producers, and to pay for the session musicians, and the mixing, and the mastering, and the pressing, and the promotion, etc. So when you're doing it all yourself, you don't have a record company that you need to share the revenue with. So that's good. You get 100% instead of a much smaller percentage. However, all the expense and all the financial risk is on the artist. Okay? And so you can take that finished recording and you can say to a record company in the USA or in Japan or anywhere else, I'll keep the ownership of that copyright. I paid to create this master recording, and I will not sell it to you. I will license it to you for a period of a certain number of years. So for the next 10 years, you, Watanabe Music, can be my exclusive licensee in Japan for your territory for this album. And so you can make a deal that will last a certain amount of time for a certain limited territory and then revert back to you at the end of that license period. Then you could relicense it to them, or you could take it to a different company and make a new deal. You can also distribute or self-distribute, where you go to another company and say, I own it, just put it out for me. I'll pay to promote it. Just collect the money and make sure it's available on Spotify and Pandora and Tidal and all the other places. Yes, sir.
Quick question.
Sure.
Back what you said originally about the masters.
Yes.
How the record label owns the master. Can more than one person or entity own the master?
All right, the question for those in the other room who can't hear is, can more than one person or entity own the master recording? And the answer is yes. You could have a joint ownership. Copyright law is perfectly fine with having multiple owners of something. Think of copyright like property. It's intellectual property. It takes some brains and talent to create, but you can't really hold it in your hand. The idea for a melody or for a chord progression or how to mix a certain bunch of sounds together. However, even though it's intellectual, it is property and you can own that, and the government recognizes that right and allows you to register it with the Copyright Office. And just like any other piece of property, like a piece of land or a bank account, there can be multiple owners sharing that. You and your wife could own a bank account together or own a home together. Perfectly fine, no different than a copyright. So it's absolutely cool to have multiple owners, and sometimes all the band members will jointly own a copyright when they pay for making the recording. Perfectly normal and customary, okay? All right, what you can do is you can take the album or the songs or the materials you've created and you can hire a distributor and say, put this out for me, promote it for me, and I'll help promote it with my social network and by going on the road and playing shows. And then when the money comes back, the distributor will take a small percentage and the rest goes to the band. Much different kind of financial structure than a typical recording contract because the band's playing for everything themselves. You can also self-distribute. That's when you take the music and you launch it onto YouTube and through TuneCore or whatever, or DistroKid, you can go out and put it onto all the different platforms where people can stream and buy your music. So that's all possible. Every deal is different. I only have an hour, so I can't go into details on everything, but you can do all these different things. Now we have traditional, what they call brick-and-mortar retail sales. How many of you have seen any record stores lately? There are not many around, are there? Now, the only place you can really buy CDs is the big box stores, places like Walmart or Best Buy. But believe me when I tell you, CDs aren't in Best Buy at a cheap price because they're making 32 cents per CD in profit. They're there to get you into the store because they want to make $320 selling you a refrigerator in Best Buy. Okay, so that's why the unbelievable sale you see, the $5.99, you can buy the greatest hits of the Beatles or whatever at Best Buy. It's because they're all the way in the back of the store in the corner, and you have to go past the refrigerators and washing machines and expensive items to get to it. Okay, it's to bring you into the store. But there are still some stores that sell music, and the genre of music that still does the best for those sales, believe it or not, is country music. Okay? Because a lot of country music is sold in rural areas, along highways and truck stops, and those people actually buy the physical product. So believe it or not, that's the best market in the United States for brick and mortar physical unit sales. And overseas, most of the world's converting to streaming as well, except Japan. For some reason, they like physical product in Japan. It still does very well there. And believe it or not, Japan is, after the United States, the second largest music market in the world. So they have more sales of music in Japan than anywhere else except here. More than England, more than Germany, more than France, the other top 5 kind of countries. Japan, believe it or not, very large music market. We also can sell music in what they call new media, digital sales. That's when people have ringtones and all kinds of strange new digital ways of distributing the music. I called a client of mine on the way over here on the phone, and before he picked up, I was forced to listen to not a ringtone, but the music that he likes. Okay, and that's called a ringback. Okay, so when you do that, my client paid the phone company a fee to get that special song that he likes, so that when I'm waiting for him to pick up, I don't just hear ring, ring, I hear the music that he likes. And I was listening to, what did he have on? It was a gospel song by Ty Tribbett, the Philadelphia gospel preacher and Grammy Award-winning singer. Okay, so those are some examples of recorded music sales. Here's an example of a project we worked on. I represented a record producer named Tim Mosley. You know him as Timbaland. And Tim produced a song called Heartburn on this album, The Diary of Alicia Keys, which, as you can see, not only sold millions of copies, but the flags on the top and bottom of the plaque picture that we're looking at are all the different countries and the flags of the nations where it went gold or platinum. It was a worldwide success, that album. All right, now let's talk about our next category, merchandising and endorsements. How am I doing on time? Good. Am I okay? All right. So when you are a band and you're out selling your wares to the world, there's another way we can make money. which is the merchandising and endorsement category. So first off, it's the famous black concert T-shirt that everybody has. And if you watched Beavis and Butthead, they're always wearing their Metallica or their AC/DC T-shirts. That's a typical example of typical concert merchandise from the tour, a souvenir of the tour. And they sell for what, $25, $30, those shirts. They're not cheap. And the reason is not because it's an expensive piece of fabric. It's a basic black T-shirt in cotton. The reason is because there's so many people in the stream of commerce sharing in the value of that shirt. There is the concert promoter who hosts the show and allows the band to put their merchandise booth up. There's the band itself. There is the guy who's standing there selling the shirts. There's Uncle Sam. There's lots of people that have their hands in the pie, and that's why concert tour merchandise can be expensive. The band gets usually around 20 to 30% of the gross sales. So that $25 shirt, the band makes $5 or $6 from that. All the other people helping them sell it get the rest of the money, and there's of course the cost of goods, because the shirts themselves, the raw shirts, cost $5 or $6 to produce. We could also do celebrity spokesperson deals. That's an example of when you have, trying to think of when Dennis Quaid, the actor, is doing a series of commercials for an insurance company. You may have seen those funny commercials. And I forget the name of the guy who was the star of the movie Whiplash about the jazz drummer student. That guy does the Farmers Insurance Company commercials. So you can also have musicians do that, and they get paid to lend their name and reputation to a brand and to be their corporate spokesperson. I've done some deals where I had a rap star from Miami, a female named Trina, and we did a deal with Sally Beauty Supply for her to be the corporate spokesperson for their hair care products and skincare products. So that's an example of an endorsement celebrity spokesperson deal. They're also called brand ambassadors. So you can call it a brand ambassador deal. We can also do fan clubs, VIP, and premiums. There are certain artists that their fans are so rabid and so legion that they can charge extra for special appearances or special access. Example would be Trent Reznor's group, 9 Inch Nails, will sell a VIP package where if you're a big fan of the group, you can pay a lot of extra money. Instead of just buying a concert ticket for $50, you can pay something like $150. And that allows you to go to the rehearsal, the sound check before the show with only a small number of people. You can say hello to the band, maybe get an autograph or take a selfie with Trent, and you pay for that privilege. That's a VIP package. You can also have premiums. Justin Timberlake did a show a couple of years ago, and he had a special area set up just on the side of the stage where anybody who sat there didn't sit in a regular concert seat, a folding chair. You sat at a cocktail table, and there was bar service, and it was right next to the stage where Justin was performing. And of course, they were serving the tequila brand that he's now the sponsor of, that he's making down in Nashville, Tennessee. So that's an example of a premium or a VIP type of thing. Now, all of this stuff where you can turn the brand name into money, that's not the same protection as you get for the actual recording or the music. The recording of the music is protected by something called a copyright. But in the United States, we have several different categories of intellectual property. And the category that describes the name or the logo that identifies goods and services, a name or logo that identifies goods and services, is called a trademark. So, for example, you can all think about a restaurant. We've all been to lots of restaurants. But if I describe to you the logo of a certain restaurant that's golden arches in the shape of an M, you know which brand I'm talking about, right? It's McDonald's hamburger restaurant. That's an example of a trademark. So that logo of the golden arches in the shape of an M represents McDonald's restaurant. A gentleman here is wearing a hoodie, and there's the word Nike on it. Anybody know what Nike means? Anybody read your mythology book by Edith Hamilton in the 8th grade? Nike is the Greek goddess of victory, okay? And they have a pictorial image which is a left to right, it's called a swoosh, that begins on the left and moves in an angle of 45-degree angle to the right in an upwards direction. It gets smaller. That's called the swoosh, and that's on every one of their items that they sell that identifies their brand. So the protection the government gives you for the name Nike or the swoosh pictorial image logo or the McDonald's golden arches, that's called a trademark.
And the person who designed that only got paid.
The person who designed it only got a little bit of money. I'll tell you a story about that. The Rolling Stones. Can anybody tell me what the Rolling Stones band trademark looks like?
The tongue.
Right, red lips and tongue. That's kind of shaped like Mick Jagger's mouth, the lead singer, right? The graphic designer who the band hired in around 1970 to create that logo for them, they paid him $1,500, a princely sum at the time. And now today, I'm sure that artist is kicking himself for taking so little. But truth be told, the band has spent the last 50 years or so promoting that trademark in everything that they do. So since they're a famous group, and if you've ever had a chance to see them in concert, they're fantastic. That's part of why that logo is so well known, because they actually are good and still using it 50 years later. Trademarks, interestingly enough, don't expire in the same way that copyrights expire. Copyrights, when you write a song, your copyright lasts as long as you live, plus another 70 years, which means you can take the income from your works and in your will, your last will and testament, give it to your heirs, your spouse, your children, your nephew, your dog, whoever you like. Trademarks are different. They don't last for that kind of calculation of time. Trademarks last for 10 years, but you can renew them. So every 10 years, you could pay a fee to the government and renew the trademark for another 10 years. And that's part of why some of these brand names are ancient, like Bayer, aspirin, or Johnson & Johnson Q-tips, or Band-Aids. Those brands have been around for years and years and years because the companies are still marketing that product, and they can keep renewing that trademark and be the only company in that category selling that particular named item. And a lot of times, companies try to think up strange names because there aren't so many really available out there. So they think up strange names to identify their brand. Think about any medicine you take, and how they have these crazy names for medicine, Nexium or Zeljan begins with XYZ or something like that. So those are examples of coming up with crazy names to identify your brand. If you want to know more about trademarks and their importance, you can go to the United States Patent and Trademark Office website, which is a very good website with great frequently asked questions, walk you through how to do it. So is the copyright website, but this one is uspto.gov. That's United States Patent Trademark Office. Patent is the other category, by the way, of intellectual property we recognize in this country. Patent is for scientific inventions or mechanical processes or designs. So if you come up with a new shape for a guitar or a new box for a foot pedal that makes a distorted sound to a guitar that you can just step on and change the sound right away, that's a scientific invention. That would be the subject of patent, not trademark. Now, if you have that foot pedal and you call it the Rockman, the name Rockman would be a trademark. So you could have a combination of these intellectual property rights for one product or service that you're selling. Oh, there they are. There's Beavis and Butthead wearing their AC/DC shirts. Okay, so it's an example of tour merchandise or branded merchandise that creates some value for Mike Judge, the guy who owns the Beavis and Butthead brand, but also for MTV. Viacom that owns it, and I'm sure they paid a license fee to AC/DC, and I think the other band is Metallica on the other guy's shirt. So I'm sure they paid a license fee to those bands to make the cartoon version of those shirts and put them within the other shirt. Okay, now the next category I'd like to talk about is music publishing. Complicated, so stay with me here, folks. Stop me if you need to ask a question. Music publishing is a bunch of different ways you can make money, all from one thing in common: ownership of the copyright in the underlying musical composition. So it's not the master recording, it's the song. They're different. Those two copyrights can peacefully coexist, not step on each other's toes, and the one that the songwriter gets is called the composition copyright, otherwise known as the PA for work of the performing arts. So, I'll give you an example. Let's take the famous Philly singer Billy Paul, who sang a big hit song, #1 song, Grammy nominated, called Me and Mrs. Jones. Okay? Now, Billy sang the song. His record company, Sony, owned the master recording copyright for that song, but the songwriters are two famous Philadelphia R&B songwriters, Kenny Gamble, Leon Huff, and a third gentleman. I forget his name, Darren something or other. So the songwriters own the copyright for Me and Mrs. Jones for the composition, and the record company owns the sound recording copyright for the recording of that composition. Another example, have you all heard the song I Will Always Love You, made famous by Whitney Houston in the movie The Bodyguard? Okay, so Whitney's record company, Arista Records, run by Clive Davis, the famous music business personality, he and his company paid for that master recording. They paid for the sessions, the session musicians, the mix, everything. They own that master recording. Whitney sings for the record company. She has a recording contract, and if the records are profitable, she gets a little share of the profit called a royalty. However, who wrote that song? Anybody know? Dolly Parton, very good. Gold star for the day. Go to the head of the class, Mo. Okay. So Dolly Parton wrote that song. So when you hear Whitney singing I Will Always Love You on the radio, remember the radio? Right. Dolly's getting paid because Dolly wrote that song. And when Dolly puts her version of the song out, Dolly also gets paid. Okay? Paul Anka, famous songwriter. If he walked in here, you probably wouldn't know him. He's just some dude. He's not a famous face, okay? But he wrote the American version, the English version of a song. It's called I Did It My Way. I'm sure you've heard that song. Made famous by not only Frank Sinatra, but also by Sid Vicious and the Sex Pistols, who did the punk rock version of I Did It My Way. And when either plays on the radio, Paul Anka's getting paid because he's a songwriter. So, music publishing has that one thing in common, it's the songwriter, and in rap music, R&B music, these days, virtually nothing that's on the charts is written by one person. Almost everything is written by a committee, usually 3, 4, 5 people. I represent this rapper from Miami named Wi-Fi's Funeral. Anybody heard of Wi-Fi's Funeral? All right, a couple of you. All right, so we're making a new album now, and I'm doing all the contracts for that album. And each one of them has sometimes one, sometimes multiple record producers, and each one of the tunes for the album has multiple songwriters. So I'm having to arrange the division of the copyright for the publishing or the songwriting money. Every single song is different because there's a different batch of writers, and that's typical of what goes on in hip-hop and R&B these days. So let's see, what do we have here? First I'm going to talk about, I just said, okay, it's a bundle of rights. Allows the owner to have multiple strings, multiple ways to make money, streams of commerce. But what they have in common is writing or co-writing the song. All right. So there's two kinds of income within music publishing category. We have small rights and we have grand rights. Most of what I'm going to talk to you about is small rights, so we'll start with those. There's a whole bunch of different ways to make money. Now, I told you about the copyright, the Trademark Office website. Here's the Copyright Office website, okay? Copyright.gov. There's this rumor out there. If you send something to yourself in the mail, certified mail, it gives you some sort of rights. It's called the poor man's copyright. Don't believe it.
Well, that's why it keeps you poor.
It has no legal emphasis whatsoever, and like Professor Ivory said, that's why it's called the poor man's copyright, because it keeps you poor. If you're going to create something and you want to protect it, don't send it to yourself in the mail. Send it to the Copyright Office and file a proper copyright. It's a simple form to fill out. You can do it online. It's 2 pages. The first time might be difficult, but after that, you'll be fine. And get this, you can file multiple copyrights at once in a bulk filing for one low, low fee. Okay, so you can group together all the tunes you've written so far and protect them all at once and be, let's say it's Maurice left. What's your name?
Gio.
Joe, okay, so the Collected Works of Joe, Volume 1. Right? You could do that and send in 10, 12, 14 songs. No limit on how many you can file at once. All you need is a computer with the stuff in MP3 format, and if you have lyrics, put them in PDF or Word format, and you fill out the form, and you upload the stuff, and then you electronically zap them $55, $55, and that covers 1, 2, or 22 pieces of work, no problem. My wife, when she's not being a lawyer with me, when she's not being a musician, she also is a photographer. And she's quite good. And she's displayed her works, she's blown them up and had photo shows and sold her works. So when we go away on vacation, she may take 300 pictures. And of those 300 pictures, maybe 7 or 8 are good enough that she might want to turn them into art. And so she'll do a filing of all 7 or 8 photographs at once to get copyright for everything. But that's the place to go to do it, and I highly recommend you take a look at that site, copyright.gov. Oh, here I am with, can anybody tell me who's that guy in the middle signing the autograph for me? Another famous songwriter you may have never recognized or heard of? Burt Bacharach, very good. Burt Bacharach. You're probably too young to remember Burt Bacharach, but you've heard his music, I promise you.
I listened to my dad.
Yeah.
Actually, in the intro production class, I've shown the whole thing of Alfie,
Okay.
the making of Alfie.
Okay, so Alfie, most of the songs made famous by a client of ours, Dionne Warwick, were written by Burt Bacharach and his partner Hal David. A lot of really, really famous Grammy and Oscar-winning music was made by Burt Bacharach. Okay, so let's get back to publishing. We'll start with small rights. So the first small right I want to talk about is called mechanical royalties. Remember I told you the record company owns the sound recording copyright and the songwriter owns the publishing copyright? So when the record company releases the record and sells it for, to the public, they have to pay the songwriter and the musicians who sang. So when Arista Records sells a Whitney Houston Bodyguard soundtrack that contains I Will Always Love You, written by Dolly Parton, Arista Records owes the songwriter Dolly Parton a little bit of money. That's called a mechanical royalty. So from sales and streams of recorded music that contain within that the underlying musical composition, you have to pay this royalty to the songwriter. Okay? And the government has an office called the Copyright Office, and they set the price, and they adjust it every couple of years. Right now it's a little less than a dime, 0.91, 9 1/10 pennies for every unit sold. Doesn't seem like much. Okay, sold an album and got it a little less than a dime. That's nice. Well, I met this guy who's a wonderful bass player from England named Nick Lowe. You may have heard of Nick, maybe you haven't. Great guy. And Nick is a bass player, a musician, and a record producer. And he had been recently fired by Warner Brothers Records because his records weren't selling, so they dropped him. They said, thanks, Nick, we love you, but we can't make money with you. You're free to go. Get a new deal with somebody else. We can't afford you anymore. And a week after he got fired, he found out that a song that he had written and produced for another artist named Elvis Costello was chosen to go into the Bodyguard soundtrack. It wasn't I Will Always Love You. It was just some other song on the album. Well, the Bodyguard soundtrack was a huge, huge hit. In fact, it's the 3rd biggest selling album in history of the record business. And he told me it was like hitting the lottery, because a week after he got fired, he got this monstrous check for mechanical royalties, because it doesn't seem like a lot, 9.1 pennies, but when you multiply it by platinum, which is 1 million sold, that's $91,000. Okay? So he said he got this huge check, and he said, I didn't care that Warner Brothers fired me because I hit the lottery. I hit the Whitney Houston sweepstakes. If you have multiple songwriters, remember we talked about rap records and how they have all these different people, and they divide up the copyright. So let's say there's 3 songwriters, and each guy is taking 1/3. They're each going to get 1/3 of 0.91 cents, which is a little over 3 pennies. Okay? So mechanical royalty, what's that?
So 30,000.
Right, so it could be 30,000 on a platinum record. But, interestingly enough, for artists that write their own material, like, say, Bruce Springsteen, when Bruce puts a record out, and he's got 10 or 12 songs on it that he also wrote, not only is he making money from the recorded music sales as a songwriter, he's getting paid, okay? Because he gets this big check as a songwriter. So usually, the songwriter in the band makes more than everybody else, because the songwriter, he or she or both of them, whoever they are, they've got this extra stream of income, all right? So that's number 1 in the small rights. Now we've got performance rights. So performance rights are when your music is played in public, either in a jukebox or in a bar, someone performs the song, or on the radio, or when you're shopping at Rite Aid and you're happily shopping and then you hear your favorite song on Rite Aid radio. What do? You stay in the store a little longer. Maybe you're going to buy an extra bottle of shampoo. So when the music is used by businesses to help those businesses make a profit, they have to share that profit with the songwriters. That's the law. In the United States is so big of a market that we have not 1, not 2, but 4 different societies you could join to help collect that money for you. Most countries just have 1. In Japan, they have JASRAC. In Canada, they have SOCAN. But in the United States of America, we have ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, and what's it called? Global Music Rights?
Yes, a new one.
The new one that Irving Azoff owns. So you join one of these societies, and what they do is they go out and they get licenses from all the businesses that might use the music. They actually make Rite Aid pay. They make every radio station pay, every nightclub, every jukebox owner, every bar. They pay what's called a blanket license fee. It says, okay, I'm paying my fee of $100 or $500, whatever it is, and now I can use that music as much as I want for the entire year. Now, most bar owners don't have time to look at the liner notes of each album and say, okay, this one's a BMI writer, I'm not going to use that, I'm only using ASCAP. That's silly. They just buy them all. They get all the licenses from all the different organizations, and they can perform any music they like. But this is nice, what they call mailbox money, because if you write a song and it becomes a hit out there and it gets played a lot, you walk to your mailbox one day, there's a check waiting for you. Or if you're doing it online, you open your online banking and there's an electronic deposit. So it's pretty nice. Professor Ivory's written songs, I've written songs, and it's awfully nice when all of a sudden you get a little note from BMI saying, guess what?
Thing.
Guess what? There's some extra money in your account. You can buy lunch today, right? Okay. All right, the next small right is called sampling. We see this a lot in hip-hop and R&B. When people use a sampling machine, which is a digital recording device, to capture a portion of an earlier work and either use that as the underbed for some new work that they add on top, a rap or different kinds of music, or they might alter that a little bit and use it as another sound within a new composition. When you do that and use the sampling machine to add to a new work, you need to get permission from the owner of the 2 copyrights that you borrowed in order to create your new work. The same 2 copyrights I've been talking about, the record company that owns that old master recording that you sampled, and the songwriter who wrote that composition that you sampled. So then you call a sample clearance company or Bernie the attorney, and we make a deal for what it's going to cost you to use that. And the price can be all over the place. There's no rules. It's the Wild West. Whatever you can make up, whatever you can invent, whatever you can dream out is possible. I did a deal once, crazy deal, where I was representing a West Philly-based record producer. And he was working on a rap project with this kid who went to Lower Merion High School, who was a basketball player and also perceived himself a rapper by the name of Kobe Bryant. Okay? Kobe's father, Jelly Bean Bryant, played basketball for the Philadelphia 76ers in the 1970s. And after he finished with the 76ers, he had 1 or 2 more years left, but no NBA team wanted him. So he moved to Italy for a year when Kobe was 12, 13 years old. And he played in the Italian Basketball League. And while Kobe was there, he learned Italian. He's fluent in Italian. I don't know if you ever heard him give an interview at the Olympics in Italian, but he does it. And he was rapping in this combination of Italian and English that my client was making the beats for and making the music. And Kobe got a record deal with Sony. And one of the songs that the guys are working on had a sample of the soundtrack of a Hollywood movie called First Blood Part 2. It was a Rambo Sylvester Stallone movie, and it was written by a famous Hollywood composer named Jerry Goldsmith. Okay? And Jerry's won Oscars. He's passed away now. He was a wonderful guy. Great, great composer. And so the guys wanted to use that soundtrack, a little snippet of it, and sample it to put into Kobe's rap song. And we called up Jerry and we said, how much is it going to cost? Do you want money up front? Do you want a percentage on the back? What do you want? He said, I got plenty of money. I don't need money. What I can't get is Lakers tickets. And so Kobe said, sure. 4 tickets courtside next Saturday night, no problem. Got the sample cleared. But then Kobe decided, I should play ball and concentrate on that and not being a rapper. So the album never came out. But the point is that I've got a demo of it somewhere. It's pretty ridiculous. But you can make whatever deal you want to use a sample. Okay. Then there's something called interpolations. They're similar to samples because you're taking some old material and putting it within a new composition, but you're not using a sampling machine anymore. Now you're hiring musicians to replay and re-perform that old work. So when you do that, that's called an interpolation. The only difference between an interpolation and a sample is this. With a sample, you have to get 2 permissions, right? Because you're using the original songwriter's work and you're using the original sound recording, that master tape. But with an interpolation, you're not using that master tape. You hired people to replay it. So you don't need to go to the old record company who owns the copyright for the sound recording of that thing because you're not using it. But you still have to get permission from the songwriter, and you have to hire the musicians to come in and replay it, which is going to cost some money as well. But some people prefer to do that as compared with paying for a sample, especially when the record company may say, not at any price, we're not interested in licensing our old master recording. Right. Okay, more small rights. Next one is synchronization. That's when you take some music and you combine it with some pictures to make a better product and a more interesting product. So, television programs, movies, video games, advertisements, those are all examples of synchronization deals. You have to use those copyrights from the songwriter and the record company because you're taking that material and attaching it to voiceover, different pictures, dialogue, whatever's going on in the film. So think about John Travolta and Uma Thurman in the movie Pulp Fiction dancing to Chuck Berry's You Never Can Tell. Okay, that's an example of a synchronization. Also, I did a deal where my client had produced and written a song for Beyonce Knowles called Drunk in Love. I'm sorry, it wasn't that. It was called Grown Woman. And Grown Woman was used in a Diet Pepsi commercial that was on the internet as well as on the television. So we made a contract for the Diet Pepsi company to license that piece of music for use in those commercials, to synchronize it with the pictures of Beyonce dancing while she was holding a can of Coke. All right, so that's synchronization. This can be, by the way, very, very lucrative. All right, because the money that you get, for example, in a major Hollywood motion picture by Paramount or 20th Century Fox or Warner Brothers, one of the big Hollywood companies, Disney, for example, they're paying somewhere between usually $25,000 and $100,000 just to borrow your song for a few seconds. I did a deal recently to take 6 seconds of one of my clients' pieces of music and to put it into the new movie Angry Birds 2. Anybody seen that one yet? It's a great cinematic achievement. All right?
It's really fantastic.
Yeah, well, we got $10,000 for that deal for 6 seconds. And my client still owns the copyright at the end. They're just borrowing it. Okay? So that's an example of a sync deal. Next, we have new media. Sort of talked about this before. Ringtones, ringbacks, etc. The songwriter gets paid as well as the owner of the master recording because that composition is being used in those ringtones or in those ringbacks. Next, we have print rights. I'm sure you've seen this. It's the easy guitar, piano, play-it-at-home version for those of us who can read music. Okay? Well, you may pay $3.95 for that sheet of music, and of that, a small portion, usually 12 to 20 cents, goes to the songwriter. You can also do that digitally. Now they have these digital versions of sheet music that you can download or that you can access. Similar to pay a fee in order to do that, and some of it goes on to the songwriter as a small right. And we also have lyric reprints. Here's a funny story. This is when you pay money to reprint not the title of the song, not the logo of the band, but some lyrics within, say, a Hallmark greeting card. There's a song by Britney Spears. Forgive my language, but there's a song by Britney Spears. I think it's called Gimme More. It came out on her Circus album 8-9 years ago. A bunch of people co-wrote it, including one of my clients. And the first 3 words of the song are, "It's Britney, bitch." Right? That was his line. He got a very small percentage of that copyright because that was the line he contributed to that song. But then Britney decided that when she did her concert tour, she was going to sell some merchandise, t-shirts. And on the shirt, she wanted it to say, "It's Britney, bitch." Anybody seen one of those shirts? Right, they're out there, okay? So my client who wrote that line got a little percentage of the money that was earned on the t-shirt sales because that is a lyric reprint, all right? So any way that they're using your copyrighted stuff, you're entitled to get a little money. This is why it's so important to file those copyrights to preserve and protect and perfect your right to make money on that for as long as you live, plus 70 years. I told you at the beginning, pennies turn into dollars, right? This is why all this matters. Finally, we have grand rights. That's a combination of everything. Okay? When are you going to see that? Usually it's in a Broadway theater kind of production where you're taking pieces of music and using it and weaving it into the plot, using the characters or the stories within the songs to make it into what becomes what they call the book or the script for the play, and advances the plot forward. So in order to make that happen, you need sheet music rights so the people who were in the pit band can learn the music. You need mechanical rights for the soundtrack album. You may need lyric reprints. there's all kinds of different rights you may need that are the small rights. So they combine them all into something called grand rights. And here is some examples of grand rights. These are all shows that are examples of grand rights. So Moving Out was the music of Billy Joel, choreographed by the great choreographer Twyla Tharp. We Will Rock You is the music of Queen, Mamma Mia, etc. These are all examples of where the music becomes part of the plot. The characters are based on the characters within the songs, and the music used to advance the plot forward. Okay. Now, you can make money in music publishing and try to collect everything and administer all these small rights and grand rights yourself, or you could hire a music publisher. Music publisher is a company that exploits your songwriting and publishing catalog. Okay, so you give them the right to go out and collect all the money, make all the deals, and try to turn your catalog into value by getting and looking for all those kinds of small rights deals or grand rights deals that I've been mentioning. So we have several examples. We have a full, a co, and an administration deal. Full publishing deals are old-fashioned. They're very rare these days. Basically, the publisher is going to take ownership of your copyright forever. Pay you a lot of money, but they're going to own it. Co-publishing deal, publisher will share ownership with you and jointly own that copyright, going back to your question. So you can jointly own that piece of intellectual property. And now you've got a partner. They pay you some money, but now they're your partner for as long as the copyright lasts. And they'll do all the back office work and all the collection, but they get usually half of the money that's generated. Administration deal is different. That's where you keep the ownership of the copyright yourself, but you hire the publisher to do all the papering, all the back office work. Somebody wants a synchronization deal, send it to the publishing administrator, let them do the contract, let them collect the money. So in that circumstance, the administrator doesn't co-own the copyright with the songwriter. The administrator merely administers the catalog or takes care of the deals that need to be done and earns a commission, usually 10 or 15%, to do that work. Now, another picture here. These are all the people that are involved in a typical recording artist professional team of advisors. The artist is in the middle. They're the heart and soul of everything. But all these folks help the artist in different ways. So I'll start at the top and go around like a clock. We have the manager. The manager's job is to guide, advise, and counsel the artist and help create a career for the artist. Okay? They're involved in all decisions, and managers become very, very well known. Somebody like me, the attorney, I'm only involved once in a while. Usually when a contract needs to be negotiated, drafted, or when there's a legal problem to solve. Then I get the call. Okay? There could be an insurance advisor. Why would you need insurance? Your equipment is expensive. You're taking it from town to town. People could get hurt in your crew. You want to make sure that they're taken care of and protected. What about health care? There's lots of things that could happen out there on the road to hurt people and hurt their equipment. I'm sure you've read the horror stories of bands whose truck gets stolen and all their gear is gone overnight. You know, this does happen. Insurance policies can help soften that blow when it happens. So you need an insurance person to help you with all this stuff. You have your record company who does your recorded music. You've got your music publisher, we've been talking about that. Your merch companies in charge of creating the designs and manufacturing and distributing and selling those shirts and hats and posters and belt buckles and pins and whatever else you're selling as souvenir merchandise. You might have someone to help you with public relations or social media. Most artists are on social media these days. The ones who do the best are the ones that are doing it themselves organically. Lady Gaga is the best example I can think of for that. She was wonderful at building her little monster fan base by tweeting to them herself. But not all artists do it. Some don't have the time or inclination, don't know what to say, so they hire people to do it. Whether or not the fans believe it or support it, that's a horse of another color. But that's what a social media and public relations person might do. You also need an accountant to keep track of all these dollars to make sure the taxes get paid. And you take care of Sam, your uncle. Because if you don't, they're the biggest, meanest collection agency in town. So look out for the IRS. Make sure you pay those taxes. If you don't pay your taxes on time, then you're subject to penalties and interest, which can really add up and mount quickly. Just remember that even though we're in a cash business, even if you earn cash, it's still taxable income. There's nothing wrong with reducing the taxes you owe to the absolute legal minimum. That's fine. What you can't do is evade the taxes. That's criminal. That people go to jail for evading taxes, okay? There's a difference, okay? You have to report and pay, even if you take advantage of all that the law will give you for loopholes or this or that you could, all fine, just don't evade paying them. The government doesn't take too kindly to that. I already mentioned the booking agent. That's the person who helps you get your gigs. Okay? So that's a typical artist with all these people surrounding the artist. So that's why artists feel a lot of pressure sometimes, because they feel sometimes like, all I wanted to do was make some music. Now I'm supporting this giant universe of people all around me. So you see a lot of artists mid-career just take a step back and say, I'm going to do nothing for 2 years. Everybody hit the road. Leave me alone. Because they can't take the responsibility, and they just want to go back to the way it was when they were young, poor, and happy. You know? Mo money, mo problems, like they say. All right. All right, here's another example of endorsements and festivals. I'm not showing you this picture because the girls are cute. I'm showing it because you've got endorsements. They're holding up branded brands of Corona beer. The stage you see in the background is on the beach in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. This is April of this year. It's called the Tortuga Festival. The headliner was the guy with the cowboy hat, Kenny, New Shoes Radio. It's Kenny Chesney? Is that his name?
Probably.
Yeah. So he was the headliner. I had a client that performed on that stage behind these ladies, and it was on the beach, and it was very environmentally friendly kind of festival, very cool. But as you can see, the stage has signage on it, and the ladies in this picture are holding up their phones and their merchandise that's branded, and endorsements can be combined with festivals, and that's why you often see brand sponsorships at tents and on stages within festivals, and why there's only a certain brand of beer for sale there or a certain brand of water. Okay? Now, many people want to go into business but don't realize that there are ways that you could go to protect yourself from liability. How do I not get sued, or how do I limit the financial blow if I get sued? Or how do I lower the taxes I owe? You can do these things legally and legitimately by forming an entity. So instead of being Bernie Resnick, you're Bernie Resnick Incorporated, for example. And many bands and recording artists do this to save money on taxes and to limit themselves from potential liability for people who are making claims against them. You stole my copyright, I broke my ankle at your concert because I was dancing on the sand at Tortuga, it's your fault, you shouldn't have played so well, etc. So you could form an entity, and these are 3 different types of entities that are recognized. Limited liability company is sort of a combination, a hybrid of a corporation and a partnership. So we'll start at the bottom. Partnership is a couple of people decide to get together. We are in business together. You don't need to go do anything special. You just say we're in business. The difficulty with partnerships is that one partner could bind or commit the partnership to something without telling or getting permission of the other partner. That could be a problem. All right? In a corporation, you form this fictitious legal entity, and Bernie the attorney writes to Harrisburg and gets the entity formed for you. Now you're Bernie Resnick Incorporated, or you're Bryce Canyon Band Incorporated. Okay, so when you do that, you become a shareholder or an owner, and your ownership stake in the business is represented by the shares that you hold. So if there's 5 kids in a group, they might form Group Incorporated and each get 20 shares out of the total of 100 that are out there. Each would get a vote. Each would get some ownership stake in this business, and then you have all of the money flow into and out of that corporation as a way to save you some taxes and to protect their personal assets, like their house, their car, their bank account, from anybody trying to grab it if there's a problem or a legal claim. And then a limited liability company is sort of a combination of corporation and a partnership. And that, you know, corporations are kind of complicated. You have to have meetings and bylaws and keep written notes of the meetings called minutes, and you have to file them in a certain book, et cetera, et cetera. You have to do it regularly. Partnership, you don't need to do anything. You can just go out there and get in all the trouble you want. What a limited liability company is it gives you the protection from liability of a corporation, but it gives you the ease of operation of a partnership. So it's kind of a combination thing. It's a rather new animal that a lot of lawyers like me are using for our clients. We can get more into that some other day when you take business entities class. If you have any questions, now's the time for me to answer. Fire away.
Let me get a microphone so we can hear them online
I want to ask a question for a student-based question.
Oh, go right there.
Thanks. So I'd like your opinion, and this is going to affect the younger generation.
Okay.
So the Pharrell, Thick, Marvin Gaye lawsuit.
The Blurred Lines case.
A much different than the Coldplay Satriani, note for note copyright infringement.
Right.
But this one, which I was surprised about, where it wasn't really an exact copy, it's kind of the essence of Marvin Gaye. So, like, what your opinion about those things that sound close? They wanted it to sound like that, but Marvin Gaye, their family won that lawsuit.
That's correct.
So, your opinion about those evocative kind of songs,
Sure.
where really don't come under the copyright law rules, where it's a note for note melody and lyric
Yes.
lift.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So what you're asking about is there's been many, many lawsuits over the years from people who say, you stole my song. You sampled it without my permission. Or your new song is basically a replay of my song without my permission. In the law, those are fairly cut and dried. In order to win a lawsuit like that, you need to show two things. One is that the infringer, the bad guy, had access to the good guy's music. It's possible the bad guy heard the good guy's music. What's that mean? It was on the radio, or it was played in public. There's a lawsuit going on right now about Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin, where the band Taurus is saying, you stole our song. The band Spirit is saying you stole our song called Taurus. And how do they prove this access? Well, when Led Zeppelin started, before they were famous, they were the opening act for Spirit in 1968 on a tour. And Spirit was playing Taurus. This is before Stairway to Heaven was written, 3 years later. So they're saying, okay, Led Zeppelin had access to our song, no doubt, because they heard us play it every night while they were waiting, after they finished and we played after them. Then the second part of the test, in order to win that lawsuit, is you have to show substantial similarity, which is that the infringing song is identical to the song that it infringed. And if you think about My Sweet Lord by George Harrison, it kind of duplicates the melody, chord progression, tempo, and rhythm of He's So Fine by the Chiffons. It just adds different words. So that's an example of how you can win a lawsuit by showing substantial similarity and access. Now, the case about Blurred Lines and the Marvin Gaye song Got to Give It Up is very different because it's not a sample, it's not a replay, there's nothing in common in terms of the rhythm, the typical elements of a song, rhythm, chord progression, melody, lyrics, none of those are in common. But what what Pharrell Williams and Robin Thicke decided to do in the recording studio was they wanted to emulate the feel, the vibe, the aura of Got to Give It Up. So the way they recorded that song, and you guys are recording students, is they had a very open kind of sound with background noise. Got to Give It Up, the Marvin Gaye song, gives you the feeling like you're at a backyard barbecue and there's a band playing over there at the end. It's a little bit distant in terms of the mix, sounds like you're far away, and you can hear this extraneous noise. And Pharrell and Robin did the same thing when they made Blurred Lines. And there was a lawsuit over this, and the Marvin Gaye estate, because Marvin was killed in a tragic incident with his father, relatives and fish both begin to stink after 3 days. They got into an argument on Christmas, and Dad shot him in the chest. And that was the end of Marvin Gaye. It's really a tragedy, it's a shame. But anyway, the Marvin Gaye estate had a lawsuit against Pharrell Williams and Robin Thicke saying that emulating the vibe basically ripped off their copyright. And the court decided in favor of the Marvin Gaye estate against Pharrell and against Robin Thicke, saying it does infringe Got to Give It Up's copyright, which was very, very unique and new law and broke new legal ground. Many entertainment lawyers, including myself, think it's a bad decision. Okay? But it is the decision. Interestingly enough, though, what happened after that decision is I started to get some phone calls from people who said, we're working on a song that's kind of similar to something that your client did. We'd like to get a license and pay a client. And I said, sure, right. Send over some money. We're happy to do it. But yeah, it's a new area of the law. So it's not a sample. It's not an interpolation. It's this other amorphous, weird category that has a life of its own right now. That case is on appeal. Once the appeal is decided, then we'll know whether that stands or it's sent back and retried or thrown out.
And then that would be a precedent at that point.
If it stands and the appeal is withheld, that will be precedential, which means not presidential PREC. In legal terms, precedent means a judicial decision from before. And judges tend to follow prior decisions. That becomes the new law. The law is always changing, and judges rely on what other courts have done. And for example, in the Led Zeppelin case, which is again trying to break some new ground about similar songs like Taurus and Stairway to Heaven, other judges in other copyright infringement cases that are pending right now have suspended the cases until they hear the outcome of Led Zeppelin and the appeal in the Marvin Gaye, Robin Thicke case, so they can then render their decision based on precedent and prior decisions of other judges. The idea being you want the law to be consistent in all the different states. We have 50 states and we have a federal system, and you don't want somebody to do what's called forum shopping, which means, well, I'll sue in Maryland because there's a decision there that's favorable to my opinion on this case, as opposed to suing in Illinois where the law was in the other direction. So precedent tries to keep things harmonized and homogenized, and we try to have consistent laws in our country. I hope that answers your question.
Right. What's better for music, though? Is it let the youngins use those sounds, like those grooves, or pay those old people?
Well, you know,
what's the best?
We'll have a beer someday and talk about it. That's a long discussion. It's not really a legal discussion. You know, I mean, you can't stop the advance of technology.
Right.
And you can't stop kids from wanting to make something new out of the old, and you can never stop kids from making new music, and you can never stop parents from saying, oh, this generation's music stinks. It's not nearly as good as ours was. Mm-hmm. Every generation says that about the next generation. But, you know, whether it's good or bad for music, I really don't know.
Okay.
You know, I think that sampling, in a way, is really dangerous because it stifles creativity and it causes people to be lazy and not to learn how to play the damn instrument. But, on the other hand, one thing that's cool about sampling is that the producers who are doing a lot of sampling don't really care about genre, they care about sound. Right. So then you can get today's African-American, urban-dwelling hip-hop producer using a 1970 white country record from Nashville because she likes the sound. And that, I think, is really cool, that there's no prejudices, no preconceived notions when people are sampling. It's just, what makes the new tune sound better? So it's very inclusive. So I'm kind of conflicted about that.
Some more questions?
Sir.
This is something else I think would be beneficial for everyone to know. Speaking about sampling, I know that the law has fluctuated from time to time in terms of what is the legal limit in terms of seconds that you can sample from something and get away with not having to clear it.
Yeah.
So what is the current state of that? Because I mean,
zero. There is no amount that you can use, no matter how small, how much you chop it up, how much you bury it in the mix or alter it. If you use any pre-existing copyrighted material, you must seek clearance and permission from both copyright holders of the composition and the sound recording. That's the current state of the law. Any amount of sampling, you have to clear.
A green room resident.
Hello.
Hi, Mr.
Welcome.
Resnick.
Nice to meet you.
So let's say it's your first time copywriting music,
Okay.
And there was a lot that you went through. Is there a way where you can organize, I guess, is there a way to organize in different steps what you should do first in terms of like copywriting and then licensing and then releasing?
Sure. I think ground zero has to be copywriting, okay? Because that's what really establishes your ownership rights in this piece of intellectual property. Once you establish that you own it and you've registered it with the Library of Congress, that allows you to have a bundle of rights and remedies. So if someone infringes it, you can then sue them in federal court and ask for not only to be compensated for what money you lost, but also your lawyer's fees and your costs of court. You can't do that if you haven't registered. So you start by registration. Now, copyright doesn't begin when you register the song. It begins when you create the work. It's born when you fix the work, which is when you change it from an idea to something that's tangible that other people can hear. So when you record it or write it down on sheet music or sing it into a tape recorder or come in here and make a recording, a scratch recording of it, that's when copyright begins. Registration comes later, but your rights relate back to when you first created the work. And there's a magic word called fix. When you fix the work, by rendering it into a tangible form that someone else can experience, that's when copyright is born. Interestingly enough, you have that right whether or not you register, but your remedies are greater if you do register the work. So once you've registered the work and created the work, then you can proceed to exploit the work. I wouldn't advise anybody to try to make a distribution deal to release a record nationally and let the whole world hear it and potentially copy it and reuse it or put it into something without permission unless I have a copyright first. That way I know I've got a bigger hammer I can threaten to hit somebody with if they wrongfully use my client's work. Okay? So I would say create the work first, then register the work, then begin to exploit the work. That's the logical order of things. Now, I also have one other point I was thinking of that I could make about that. Oh yes, in the United States of America, whether it's a copyright, a trademark, a patent, you cannot protect an idea. I'll say that again slow. You can't protect an idea. You can only protect the physical embodiment of the idea. Okay, so if you have an idea I got an idea for a movie. It's a time machine movie, and I'm going to take a robot from the future and put him in a time machine and send him to the past because the people are rebelling against the machines in the future. And I'm going to send this robot to kill the rebel leader when he's a kid before he can grow up to become the rebel leader. That's the Terminator, right? That's an idea for a movie. You can't protect that. What you need to do is write the script, file a copyright for the script. If you have an idea for a melody or a song or a story or a photograph or a piece of painting or art, you've got to render it into a tangible form and change it from an idea to something that someone else can experience. Then you can get your protection. Whether it becomes a copyrighted trademark or a patent, we'll decide later once you create it. But the idea itself, not protectable. A lot of people come to me and they say, oh, somebody swiped my idea, what do I do? I say, you can't do anything. Okay? You got to create it and protect it. Then you can do something about it. So again, render it into a tangible form, file that copyright registration, and then you're good. All right?
Thank you.
Who's next?
Okay, so I have a question about a lot of producers who make beats and stuff. They're doing leases and stuff where they're basically, you pay them a small amount of money and more than like an exclusive rights and or less than exclusive rights, and then you get their
Some
beat
limited
for a-
rights to
Yeah,
use it,
yeah. So as it goes to copyright, I have a guy who came to me with a bunch of leases he bought, and he wanted me to record his songs and stuff, and we did, and we're about finished up. And what's the idea with copyright on that? Is he able to copyright the songs because his lyrics are on top of it and he paid for the fair use?
It's a good question, and those lease agreements are a mess.
Yeah.
Okay, I see them all the time, and generally speaking, I tell the clients, well, you can't even use this. It's usually something that somebody found on the internet, some stupid contract that they tried to tinker with themselves and play lawyer at home, and it just doesn't make any sense, and it's deficient in many, many ways, and most likely unenforceable. Also, in most of these circumstances, you don't even know the name or the address or the date of birth of the person you're leasing this beat from. How can you register a copyright if you don't even know who your partner is, right? So I usually tell the client, this is not going to work. Let me correspond with this person and do a proper agreement, okay? The answer to your question of whether it's copyrightable or not, or how do you go about it, I have no idea, because if you look at these forms that you find from these people on the internet who are leasing their beats, they're all over the map. Everyone is different. Most of them make no sense or have internal inconsistencies within the document. So it's very hard for me to answer the question specifically. In the abstract, though, be careful. Be very, very careful, because you might not get the rights you think, and every deal with every producer who's licensing these beats on the internet may be different. Some people charge $50 for this, $500 for that. You own it, you don't own it, you can use it, you can't use it, you can this, that. It's all over the place, and usually a mess. Okay?
Now, conversely, if you had a split sheet with not maybe a leased, not a leased beat, but you were a songwriter and a producer, and you were part of the songwriting team, and you had a split sheet, and you wanted to copyright your share of that split, but the other people are not wanting to copyright anything. Tell them how you can still protect your portion of that with an unknown writer.
Any person who is a joint owner
With
of
a split sheet.
a split sheet is a typical paper that says this is the name of the song, this are the names of the co-authors, this is how much of a percentage of this copyright we each control. So let's say there's 2 people who made the music and 3 who made the lyrics, then you might have 25, 25, 16.6, 16.6, 16.6, adding up to 100% of this copyright, for example. Everybody signs it. Then when you have your copyright filing, you list all 5 as authors. But the copyright forms on the website, interestingly enough, do not have any place to say what percentage each has. Right. So under copyright law, unless you have a separate document, and you don't need to file this with the office, but you just keep it at home, if you have a split letter or split sheet that says how we're dividing this, that can alter what the money flow is going to be from that copyright. If you don't have a split letter, the copyright law assumes we're all equal. So 5 writers, each gets 20%, not 25 or 16.67. So that's why it makes sense to do a split letter so that you know who the parties are and how much each is supposed to get. And by the way, I think the best time to do a split sheet is today, when you finish the work in the studio right now. And the reason is because human nature, greed will take over. People will accurately assess their contribution to a project before it's successful. Well, I just did 3 words. It's Britney, bitch. Give me a small percentage, no problem. But once it's a hit, hey, they're dancing to it because those are my 3 words that start the song. Wait a minute, I wrote the melody. Hey, I'm playing the drums. Next thing you know, you got a big argument on your hands, and you don't want that. So people will be more accurate about it before it goes out and becomes a hit. Plus, you might have met a songwriter who was sleeping on his girlfriend's sofa, happened to be hanging around the studio, had a nice voice, came in, wrote a line. Yeah, let's get that dude to sign. Well, he's gone. He's on the streets again. I don't know where he is or what his name was. Then you got a problem. A copyright holder you can't find. So again, better to do it today rather than some other time indefinitely in the future. And in terms of protection, anybody who's a joint owner of a copyright, any of these 5 people in my example, could file that copyright on behalf of all. Because it's a piece of property and you're a shareholder. So you would file the copyright yourself, you'd spend the $55, and you'd say, these are the 5 writers. These are their names, these are their dates of birth, boom, boom, you're done. And then you've now protected it for everybody, which also includes yourself. You don't really want to file it just for you. You can say, I'm the claimant, but I'm one of 5 co-authors. Perfectly fine. Anybody who's a co-author or an agent or a lawyer for the author can be the claimant, filling out the form and making the copyright claim, but the authors will always stay the same. There's nothing that stops one of the authors from filing. And the responsible one should be the one that does that. And the responsible one's going to be the one that's going to make more money than everybody else because he or she knows what she's doing and takes advantage of the law to protect everybody. Anybody else have a question?
What if you're doing a cover of a song,
Okay.
and the song that you're covering doesn't have, it's not out on any streaming services,
Okay.
but the artist released an album, and if you got like an exclusive package, you
got
bought
the
the
song.
exclusive package for that album, they gave you a set of their demos, and the song was on that, it was in that demo set.
Okay. All right. So a cover, for those who don't know, a cover is when an artist does their own version of a pre-existing composition. Okay? So for example, when Sid Vicious and the Sex Pistols did their version of I Did It My Way by Paul Anka, that's a cover. Okay? Let me go back on the slides. I'll show you. All right, here we go. Give me a second to get to the proper slide. Small rights, part 1, should be the first thing here, mechanical royalties. Okay, so when you do a cover, you have to pay the same mechanical royalty rate as if the original version was out there. So that's going to be the case no matter what. For every sale, you owe 9.1 cents. If people buy your album with your cover of that, you've got that. Now the question is really, can you do it at all? Okay, can you do a cover of a song that's not commercially released? And the answer is, well, you can. If they've distributed it to you and they've parted with it, they've made it public. Even if it's a quote-unquote demo, they've sold it to you. They've made it public, and therefore now you're entitled to do a cover recording of it as long as you pay the mechanical royalty and get what's called a compulsory license. That's a mechanical license that allows you to do it as long as you make the payment. If, however, it's an unreleased piece of music and has never been put out before for public consumption, then you're restricted. Because one of the rights that you get as a copyright holder is called the first use. When you write a piece of music, you're allowed to decide who gets to put it out first. You, Sid Vicious, Frank Sinatra, whoever. Okay? After it's out there, whether it's with Sid Vicious and it sells 10 copies, or Frank Sinatra and it sells 10,000 copies, or your version sells 10 million copies, once it's out there, anybody can do a cover as long as they pay you the mechanical royalty. But until it's out there, the author gets to control the first time. And what do you do when there's multiple offers? Well, if there's multiple authors, you might want to put into that split letter restrictions saying the circumstances under which somebody might or might not be able to do the first release. Because once you're a co-owner, you can do whatever you want with it. And if one of the co-owners puts it out, sells 12 copies, now the others can't stop anybody else from doing a cover. So you may want to include a little clause in your split letter saying, we all agree that we all have to agree before anybody will commercially release this song first, because we're holding it back for just our group or whatever. So once it's out there, anybody can do a cover. But before it is, you do retain the first use rights. Understand? Okay. We got time for maybe one more question?
Yeah,
then we're
one
done?
more.
Anybody else have a question? All right, well, see, oh, there we go, back here. There's one more question. I was about to say, speak now, forever hold your peace. All right.
This might be a dumb question.
No such thing as a dumb question.
If you if you do a cover or something like that, or interpolate something, can you do that and not face any consequences if you don't make money from it, or just no matter what, if you use it, you have to pay them or credit them or whatever?
It's a very good question. It's not a dumb question. A lot of people do ask that question. They often say, hey, Bernie, I don't have any liability. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't make any money. It was promotional. I just put it out there for free. Doesn't matter. Okay? You have to get the license, even if it's just for promo purposes and you're giving it away. Why? Because you're diluting the value of that original work by putting out your version, and you're stopping the original owner of the original work from making some more money because they might get this free version instead, and you can't compete with free, right? So the argument is always a dilution of value argument, and whether or not you plan to actually make money on it is irrelevant in terms of your rights and the ability to do that, okay?
All right, everybody, let's thank Bernie Resnick here for a great masterclass on music and entertainment law. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it very much. All right, and that ends our masterclass, and stay tuned for yet another one. Thank you.